Permafrost snarled at the viper. It had some nerve trying to attack a queen. Not that it could know who she was, of course, but it still felt disrespectful. The queen of the most majestic dragon tribe to ever live being stalked by a snake. Her scales itched from the feeling of being watched by beady snake eyes. She backed closer to the cliff and slipped on the wet rocks. Her stunted claw folded backwards and she staggered again. If a viper could narrow its eyes, they would have been slits. Permafrost's heart pounded in her chest. Just one tiny spell, and she'd never have to worry about vipers ever again. But she couldn't break her promise to Crest. If that meant she would die by viper rather than save herself using all-powerful animus magic, she probably deserved it anyways. Crest, the one dragon who understood her. Crest, the one dragon who could stop her from using her power. Crest, the only dragon she loved. Just minutes ago, they had been hunting together for their 6th anniversary. Then they had decided to get each other a surprise gift, and she had come down here to hunt a viper for Crest's medicines. Ironically, Crest had recently been working on an antidote for a dragonbite viper's venom. How useful that might be right about now. Although, of course, in order to complete the antidote, she needed to test it against the venom itself to make sure it was fully functional, and Permafrost had decided to get her a viper. And now she was trapped against a cliff, being stalked by that very viper. She hissed and dug her back claws into the ground. Her eyes stung from the crisp wind and she lashed her tail. She raised her talons and struck, narrowly missing the viper's neck and hitting its side instead. The viper seemed to swell, suddenly 3 times as large and infinitely angrier. It unhinged its jaw and lunged toward her, ready to take her life with one deadly bite. But it was suddenly struck by the heated talons of an ashwing. The shadowed dragon flared suddenly with red and orange underneath their scales, as fierce as lava. The ashwing blasted the viper with his fire, then sank his talons into its underbelly. His shifting lava undercurrents quieted to a more ashy black.
Your Majesty, are you all right?
His voice was a mix of curiosity and flames, and a touch of self-righteousness rolled into one. He tipped his head politely at Permafrost in an act of respect, with eyes so similar yet so different to the ones of the viper.
I thought I was going to die. Why did you save me? Why would anyone save me?
I couldn't leave you here. The tribe needs you to keep the peace.
She had met dragons like this before. Usually they were the nobles in her kingdom. But unlike the nobles in her kingdom, this dragon seemed like he might be worth listening to. Permafrost looked into his eyes and saw kindness, something she hadn't seen from anyone but Crest in at least a decade. A spark flashed through her mind, a dangerous spark.
Thank you.
Inferno, Your Majesty.
She smiled as genuinely as she could.
Thank you, Inferno. You saved my life. Please allow me to show my gratitude.
She slid open the leather bag around her neck and drew out her perfectly sharp dagger.
What would Crest think of me now?
She ran one claw along the edge and flipped it over in her talons.
This is a bad idea. I enchant this dagger to never miss a target, to always strike the opponent precisely in the heart, and I enchant this dagger so that whoever holds it is protected from its fatality.
You're an animus?
Permafrost admired the sheen of the dagger for the last time, then carefully handed it to Inferno.
Consider it a token of thanks, and use it well.
She tried to ignore the sliding feeling along her spine. Inferno bowed, then lifted into the air, probably to be able to comprehend what just happened. Of course animus dragons were rare, but to actually talk to one. Permafrost tried to smile. She tried to shake away the guilt and the creeping feeling that her instinct was wrong, but she knew Crest would be disappointed in her. She'd broken her promise. But no matter now. She shifted her wings and straightened her shoulders, then looked down her snout at the remains of the viper, burned to a crisp, not worth salvaging. On the plus side, at least she was still alive. She could go viper hunting another time, with backup. She crouched and launched into the sky, scanning the ground for anything that might be of use to Crest's medicines. She soared over a copse of trees, feeling the wind slowly wash away the panic of her failed viper attack. Dipping to a lower wind current, she saw tangles of flowers and vines embedded in an otherwise bare cliff face. It wasn't much, but perhaps there was some kind of medical plant in the tangles that she could give to Crest. Upon closer inspection, she saw a chamomile plant among several spiked rose bushes. No flowers on either, but both could probably be of use. She carefully worked a talonful of thorny rose stems into her bag, and then another. She did the same with the shivering chamomile stalks, filling most of the space in her pouch. It wasn't much, but it was all she had the heart for after her narrow escape. The creeping feeling was still slithering and seeping down her spine from breaking her promise. Or maybe it was from the spell. Whatever it was unpleasant, and she just wanted to get back to Crest to calm her nerves. She shook herself and pressed her bag closed, trying hard not to cry.
Queens don't cry.
She had told herself this every day of her life, and she knew it was true in every icy bone of her body. She heard a familiar voice say her name, and she looked up, expecting to see Crest coming towards her. But what she saw made her blood run cold. She leapt into the sky just in time to see Inferno and Crest racing towards each other at top speed, each oblivious to the other. She recoiled in horror as she saw that Inferno was so busy admiring the enchanted dagger, he didn't realize that Crest was a dragon and not a bird. She watched in slow motion as Inferno aimed the dagger at Crest, ready to test out his lethal new toy. This could not be happening. The chances were so slim. She saw him release the dagger, and she knew the moment Crest looked up it would be too late. She tried to scream, but the only noise she could make was a panicked squeak. She tried to move, but she was frozen in place. Crest looked up and saw Permafrost, panic-stricken, just before the dagger hit her, squarely in the chest. All feeling drained from Permafrost like a waterfall, and her talons began to move again, this time of their own accord. She leapt to catch Crest as Inferno gasped and dropped out of the sky when he realized what he'd done.
No!
She howled her heartbreak to the sky, tears streaming down her pale face. She didn't care if Queens didn't cry.
The world will feel my wrath.
The sky was rapidly darkening. It seemed as if the weather was reflecting her rage and pain. The clouds seemed to grow thicker, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. She launched towards the clouds like a bullet and pulled Inferno towards her with her magic, turning snow into chains, which she used to lasso him to the ground. He tried to twist away, scrambling with his claws at the slick rocks, but there was nothing he could do. Filled with rage, angry tears were spilling out of her eyes. She nearly collapsed next to Crest, failing to see if she was still breathing. Permafrost's heart skipped a beat. The air was biting and cold, with snowflakes whipping around Permafrost's scales as she stalked towards Inferno.
I didn't mean to. It was an accident.
The Ashwing backed up as quickly as he could, still being restrained by her chains.
Didn't mean to?
Blood was starting to pool beneath her claws, staining her arms all the way up to her shoulders from the dagger in Inferno's talons. Her dagger.
I'll kill you for this!
Lightning exploded out of the clouds, causing Inferno to back more towards the edge of the cliff. The chains around him were starting to fade. The snow whipped around Crest's limp body, and the wind tore across the ledge. Both dragons dug their talons into the ground as it picked up, and in a fleeting moment, what was left of Permafrost's love was tossed over the side of the cliff, tumbling with the snow.
No!
Permafrost reached out, but she was already dead. She was gone, and there was no bringing her back. Permafrost growled, turning on Inferno and stalking closer.
I'm sorry.
Permafrost interrupted the Ashwing with a snarl.
For a simple act of kindness, I gave you power. I gave you safety. I gave you protection. I made you dangerous.
She pointed an accusing claw at the dagger, enchanted with her very own magic, enchanted to never miss a target, to strike with deadly precision.
For this one act of brutality, how much of that do you think I can take away?